Zach here. So today I'm going to talk through an example using New Relic to monitor Windows hosts and trigger EDA rulebooks, which then launch playbooks to enact some sort of remediation. So in this example today, I'm going to be monitoring disk usage. So the goal will be when a Windows host takes up more than 80% of its storage, that we go ahead and expand the disk, giving it more space and remediating the issue. So I'll be building these on an EC2 instance in AWS. So the first thing you'll want to do if you set it up similar to me is you'll need a user data script that does some of the setup for you. So I'll go ahead and show you mine and just walk through some of the key parts that set this up well. So the first thing you'll want to do is you can skip the Windows auto updates, but these registry key policies are going to be important. So this will allow us to enable WinRM so that Ansible can connect to the host itself. And then this step here actually enables WinRM. If you use Ansible for Windows, you've probably seen this script in the past. So it just downloads it and runs it. And then the next step, we're going to go ahead and create an EC2 user and add them to the administrators group. And that's the user we'll use from Ansible's perspective to connect to the host. You can give it whatever name you want. It could be Ansible service account or something like that. The next step is also very important. So this is going to be installing that New Relic agent. You can see here there's a couple variables. So we're going to plug in your New Relic API key and your New Relic account ID. And what this will do is it'll start up the agent and register the host itself with New Relic. And this last piece is also very important. So we're going to leverage the name tag from the EC2 instance itself, and we're going to rename this Windows host and go ahead and restart it. So let me actually add that to the script. And this script will be linked in the article that goes along with this video. But this will go ahead and rename the computer so that when New Relic picks it up, and I've already created an instance from this launch template. So New Relic picked it up and I gave it the name when New Relic 1. So if I go into my EC2 instances, you'll see that name matches, right? And so that is because of the script that renamed the computer that those two things match. So let me go back into New Relic and let's talk about how we can monitor the storage. So see here, I'm at about 50% and create an alert condition that will then create an event if the threshold is breached. So I'm going to go to this alerts and AI section. I'll go to alert conditions. And you'll see here I've got my alert condition created called Windows Limited Free Disk Space. Let me click on that. And you'll see my query here. Again, this will all be linked or in the blog. And I'm just querying the average disk free percentage and operating system Windows. So I'm focusing on Windows here, and then I'm grouping by those entity IDs. So each entity would be able to create its own issue. So I scroll down here, keep going down. You'll see my thresholds. So right now I have critical set as below 5 and warning set as below 20, right? So less than 20% of free disk space should trigger a warning, which then, if I look at my policy, which this condition is attached to, so this policy has that Windows limited deep free disk space condition. If I go to notifications, and I'm going to click on this, you'll see that I have this workflow set up. So when the warning is created, I actually am going to notify this webhook, and this webhook is configured, I cancel, to a particular destination. And let me go to my destinations. And you'll see here, this is my event-driven Ansible webhook and the URL. So the URL is important here. I'm pointing it at my EDA instance, and then the particular port that I've set up my rulebook to listen on, and then just /endpoint. Again, you can set this up however you want, right? I just use my DNS service to point at the particular instance running EDA in my lab. But if this was just a private IP address, as long as your New Relic instance can reach it, you'll be fine with that as well. So let's go ahead and trigger the issue itself, and then I'll walk through the rulebook. So to trigger the issue, I'm going to go over here. I've got this consume disk space playbook that I use just to create a super big file, and it will take up space, making sure that we consume, over 80%. All right, so that playbook has completed, and we have breached our 80%. So it'll take new Relic, right? So it's looking for a full minute where the free disk percentage is over 80% or below 20%. Sorry. So in the meantime, I'm going to hop over and let's look at the rulebook that is going to be listening for the on the webhook. So you'll see here to connect the two, right? We've got this port 5004, which maps back to the destination in New Relic. The rule here that we're going to use is just making sure that the payload state is defined, first of all, and then the state is activated, which is a state in New Relic for issues that get created. And then we're going to specifically be looking for alerts that are triggered by this Windows limited free disk space. If those conditions are met, we'll go ahead and launch this job template to resize our EBS volume for that particular AWS EC2 instance. In our extra bars here, you'll see I'm passing through the host, so I'm taking the impacted entity from the issue itself. I'm going to pass it through as the _host, which I'll show is what we'll leverage to match with the inventory when we run the remediation playbook. And then I just have this catch-all here to run a no-op in case I get some notifications that I'm not expecting. So we go over to controller, and I'm going to go ahead and sync my source control there, make sure everything's up to date, and I'll show you what the inventory looks like. So I've got my cloud inventory here, and I've got sources, my AWS EC2 instances, and one thing I wanted to key off of here is for host names, I'm using the tag name, and that's just to make sure that when the playbook runs, I get that same win new relic 1 from the tag name, so that that _host value that I passed in matches and the playbook finds a host to run against. I have a couple other things here where I create a keyed group, so I use the platform key, so it'll be platform _windows in this case, but if there were other hosts in my query, they would go into the platform they're relative to, and then I compose the Ansible host and I just use the public IP. So when the launch job template is created to expand the disk, I actually have a playbook here that has 2 plays. The first one running on localhost using the AWS collection. So it's mostly going to just be using the info modules to grab the instance itself, then to grab the volume, and the last step is going to be the meat of this. So using the EC2 vol module to actually modify the volume size. You'll see this value here, modify volume true. And then what I do is I take the existing volume size and multiply it by 1.2. So growing it by 20%, and then making sure it's an integer. And once that runs, so the default for my EC2 launch template is 30 gigabytes. So this will actually expand it to 36 gigabytes. I then notify this handler that's going to go ahead and restart the EC2 instance. And the second play is going to actually connect to the instance. So this comes back to that _host value that I passed through, and wanting it to match to the inventory name so that I can leverage that Ansible host, which is the public IP, and connect to it. So the first step here, I'll just wait for the connection because again, I did restart the host, so it might take a moment to be able to reach it over WinRM. And then the second step here is to make sure that we resize the file system. So just expanding the disk wouldn't actually resolve the issue on the New Relic side because it would still see the partition at 30 gigabytes. But here I'm going to use the drive letter C, and I'm going to do partition size -1, which just indicates expanded to the max supported size. And what we should see is that C drive now has 36 gigabytes, and my consumed disk space will drop below 80%, thus resolving the issue. So now I'll hop over to New Relic, and we'll just wait for that issue to get created. And it looks like it did. So we've got this new issue here, and you can see that it notified this webhook. So if I go over here, you see I've got my Windows remediation, rulebook activation listening, fire count. It did fire to the Ansible automation platform. You'll see that the job template is running. So if I click on it, I can actually look at the details. And I can see in the details the payload that came over from event-driven Ansible. So you'll see my _host, which again I pass through and matches up to my inventory host name, so that that second play actually is able to connect to the host itself using the public IP address. And then it does get the full event payload that came from New Relic as well, if you needed to leverage some of that information. So I'll pause here and let it run to completion, then we'll hop back on. All right, and now that the remediation job is done, We can see that it did sync the inventory first to get the latest from AWS, and then it ran the remediation. Let's hop over into AWS to look at our instance itself. If I go to storage, you can see now that my volume was expanded, right? So it's now at 36 gigs. That doesn't necessarily mean the file system is. So what I did is I went ahead and connected. So let me open up my RDP. I'm on the machine itself, and I'm going to do git partition in PowerShell. And what we should see here is that the size is actually going to be 36 gigabytes, and then we can check the drive as well. So we see we got our C drive letter, partition size of 36 gigs, which means the remediation worked. Let's look what git ps drive shows us. Again, similar, right? So it would have been 25 used and about a little bit under 5 because we were at 30 gigs, but now we're at 10. So our remediation playbook worked. Let's pop over to New Relic, and we should see this issue will resolve itself in a few moments once New Relic realizes that the disk free percentage is now back greater than 20%. And as you can see now, it did recognize that we're back above we're no longer below the threshold of free disk space, so the issue is closed. I hope you enjoyed this video. All the links of everything that I walked through will be added to the references section of the blog post, and I'll go through some things in more detail there as well. But feel free to drop a note in the comments if you have any questions. Thank you.